So today we're going to go over everything that you need to know about the deadlift. So firstly, you need to know the types of deadlifts that there are. So you have a standard deadlift. Then we have a snatch grip deadlift. Now we have a pause deadlift. Next, we have a stiff leg deadlift. And then lastly, we have a deficit deadlift. Now let's go over the variations of grips that you can have when doing a deadlift. So first of all, we have a standard grip where palms are facing towards us and we're pushing the bar into the palm of our hand and then squeezing, wrapping our fingers around. That's your standard grip. Next, we have a mixed grip. So this is where we have one hand that's facing, the palm is facing towards us, and one hand where the palm is facing away from us. And this is called a mixed grip. Okay. Next, we have a hook grip. So the way we do a hook grip is when we wrap our thumb around, what we're going to do is we're going to bring our fingers over our thumb. Okay, so we're pinning our thumb into the bar. So that's a hook grip. So doing the same on both sides, and we're wrapping our fingers so that they're trapping the thumb between our fingers and our thumb. And then lastly, we have straps. Now this is if you want to take kind of the grip out of the aspect of the deadlift. So the way we put on our straps is there is a right and a left hand strap. So the left hand strap, you want the actual strap to go across the palm. Okay, so across the palm, that's how you know this is the left hand, and then same on the right side. So now it goes across the palm. The way we wrap it round is when we go up to our bar, is we're going to tuck the strap underneath and wrap it round a couple times. Once I've wrapped it round and I've got a grip of it with that hand, I can twist until I feel that the strap is now firmly against my wrist, okay? And then I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side. So wrap it round. It's always a little awkward with the second hand. I'm wrapping it around and then twisting until it's tight. Now that it's tight, this basically is just taking grip out of the aspect of the deadlift, okay? So the thing that's gonna fail is not going to be our grip because it is firmly against our wrist, okay? There are other varieties of straps out there. Some of them are easier to use, some of them maybe a little bit more complex, but these tend to be the standard that most people use. So now we're going to talk technique. Okay, I'm going to go through the technique of a few different varieties of the deadlifts, but let's start off with the standard deadlift, which most of you, I imagine, will be doing. So the first thing you're going to want to do is stand with your feet underneath the bar. The bar, when I'm looking down, should be over the middle of my foot. Okay, so the bar is over the midfoot. My toes are pointing forwards, and I've got about a shoulder width stance. Okay, next step is to bend down and grip the bar. So my hands are going to go just outside my knees, okay? As narrow as they can be without hitting the knees. So gripping just outside, okay? Then wrapping and squeezing. From here, what I want you to do is drop your hips until your shins touch the bar, okay? So this will vary from person to person depending on your anatomy. So you just, once you're in this bent over position, you're gripping the bar, you drop your hips until your knees touch the bar, until your shins touch the bar. From there, I want you to think about bending the bar and getting the chest up. And then I want you to think about reaching the crown of your head to the ceiling, okay? So, putting that all together now, feet so that the bar is over the midfoot, gripping just outside my knees, dropping the hips, and then the final part of this, so I'm reaching the crown of my head to the ceiling. Now the final part of this is a big breath into the stomach, okay? And then we're gonna brace. The way that you brace is you tense your core as if someone is about to punch you in the stomach. How would you protect yourself? Same thing, okay? So big breath goes into the belly, big breath, pushing the world away, driving up, and then controlling back down, okay? You can exhale as you come down. The other key note is what I want tension created at the bottom of every single rep. So what I don't want to see is that when I come down into this position is that I'm just ripping the bar up. Okay, I don't want to be able to hear the bar hitting the plates. Okay, there shouldn't be a sound at all when I'm coming up. So as I come up, it should be silent. So bracing at the bottom, creating the tension. There you go. Silent. Okay, so that is your standard deadlift. Now let's quickly go through the snatch grip deadlift. Now for all of these variations, the technique is essentially the same. There's just a couple tweaks that we're gonna make. So with the snatch grip deadlift, all we're gonna change is how wide our grip is. Okay, so rather than coming just outside of our knees, we're actually gonna come wider, more towards, for me, the pinky being on this outer clear ring here. So outer clear ring on both sides, then same technique. Driving up and shouldering down. Now with the snatch grip deadlift, you're not going to be able to handle as much load compared to the standard deadlift, so just bear that in mind. Okay, so the next deadlift that we're gonna quickly go through is the stiff leg deadlift. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to take the legs a little bit more out of the equation, and we're gonna put it a little bit more into our lower back. So from here, we're gonna think about the same technique, but now I'm just gonna try and keep my legs straight. So I'm gonna bend over, and I'm not going to drop my hips to the ground. I'm now just gonna pick my chest up, okay? So I'm trying to keep my legs straight. My shins aren't touching the bar. And then we come up from there. Okay, so the technique is the same, but now I'm trying to keep my legs straight, almost as if I'm doing an RDL. So I'm coming down here, but instead, it's not an RDL because we're coming all the way down to the ground and then coming back up. Okay, so it's gonna be using a lot of lower back. Same thing, you're not gonna be able to handle as much load as the standard deadlift. And then lastly, let me tell you about the deficit deadlift / pause deadlift. So I like to combine these two. So I'm gonna show you a deficit deadlift. All that means is the technique is exactly the same as your standard deadlift, but now I'm raised up higher. You can change the height varying on how hard or how easy you wanna make it. I'm just on a standard 10 kilo plate here, but then everything else is the same. Bringing it to the midfoot, hands just outside, dropping the hips into that same position. Now you might not actually get your shins with this to touch the bar. Just go down to the same position that it feels when you're on your standard deadlift, okay? Your shins might not touch the bar on this one, okay? But same position, up, pushing the world away, and shouldering down. Now I like to combine this with a pause deadlift. So a pause deadlift, technique is the exact same again, but now what we're gonna do is we're going to just raise it up by maybe to like the height of the plate, up to where my feet are, almost as if like I'm in this position of a standard deadlift. And then I'm gonna pause there for 1 second before I go all the way up. So that's your deficit deadlift and your pause deadlift. Now the pause deadlift, you don't have to combine it with a deficit. You can do a normal pause deadlift where we just raise up an inch, and you can change the height where you pause as well. That's completely up to you. Okay, so now we're gonna talk about how to program for our deadlifts. So for most of you, you're probably gonna be doing a deadlift with the aim of getting that weight to go as high as possible, which is a great goal. And if your goal is to achieve as much weight as possible, then I recommend starting off with something like 5 by 5, which basically means 5 sets of 5 reps. Now, the important thing with this is that every single set, we want to try and be able to perform as many reps as possible. Obviously, we want to aim for that 5 reps in every single set. So the important thing is, when you're resting in between these sets, is I want you to allow as much rest as possible. Minimum would be 3 minutes, but I would honestly recommend going up to 5, maybe even as high as 8 minutes if you have the time for it. Okay, so that is if we're gonna be training for strength. Now, if we're training for hypertrophy, then what I would suggest is doing something like three sets of 8 to 15 reps, okay? The reps doesn't have to be super precise, as long as it's probably more than 5, and honestly, I wouldn't suggest going higher than like 15 reps. And then with this, the rest can actually be a little bit shorter. We can go as low as maybe 30 seconds. I would still maybe recommend a little bit higher and going up to as high as maybe like 3 minutes, okay? Again, if you have time permitting, I would still suggest resting like 5 to 8 minutes, but for your hypertrophy days, you probably have other exercises that you want to do. So if you're going to be resting 8 minutes between every single set, that's going to take a very long time. So if you need to, only rest like 30 seconds, but you can go up to like 3 minutes, maybe even more for hypertrophy. Now let's talk about max strength. So max strength is going to be your reps that are 3 or less. So this could be 1 rep, 2 reps, or 3 reps. And this is basically going to be your maximal weight, your like highest deadlifts. And it's basically going to teach your body how to handle like crazy heavy loads. So it's not necessarily making your muscles bigger, but it's teaching you how to hold that weight. Now let's discuss if you're a beginner for deadlifts, and I would say a beginner deadlift would be anything less than 120 kilos. That would be a beginner deadlift, and that's for your 1 rep max. If you're anything less than that, then the rules will be different compared to someone who's lifting 200 kilos plus. Now, the reason why it's different is because we need to talk about absolute load. So absolute load means that even though my failure, let's say my failure is 250 kilos, that's a 1 rep max, that is my failure, okay? If I compare that to someone else who's doing 80 kilos and that's their failure, yes, we both work to failure, but because the absolute load, so the 250 kilos is more than that 80, it's gonna take a lot longer for me to recover from that 250 kilos compared to the person doing 80 kilos. So you have to bear that in mind. The higher and higher in weight you go, the more your body has to recover from that exercise, which is why you see the very top deadlifters in a session when they're doing their like 3 rep max, 1 rep max, like they're performing with maximal intensity, they will do a set of deadlifts and they might only do 1 maximal set of deadlifts, and then that might be it for the entire session or the entire day. Maybe they'll do like 3 sets. It varies, but they cannot physically handle doing more than 1 maximal intensity set of deadlifts. And for someone like that, after they've done the heavy set of deadlifts, like maximal, let's say they're doing, like someone like Eddie Hall's doing a 420 kilo deadlift. If they do that on a Monday, it's going to probably take minimum 7 days, probably up to like 10 days for them to fully recover from that deadlift. So they need a lot more time to recover. And so when we program, we have to program differently, okay? So here's how the rules vary for someone who's a beginner and someone who's a little bit more advanced and that weight is a bit heavier. So for a beginner, I would actually suggest keeping the intensity pretty high. So once you get past like maybe 150 kilos as a 1 rep max, then it might change a little bit. But let's say 150 kilos or less, I would suggest every single session you do your deadlifts, I would suggest being at like the maximal intensity until you start increasing. And if you start to see that you hit a plateau, then maybe that's your sign that you need to then change it. But up until you either hit a plateau or maybe once you're past like 120, 150 sort of kilos, then I would suggest doing maximal intensity on every single session. Now, if you're more advanced or like intermediate to advanced, I wouldn't suggest going maximal intensity in every single session. And in fact, I would periodize it in such a way that week 1, I'm going to do 85% of what I think I can do. So let's say I can do 100 kilos for 5 reps, then I'm only going to do 85 kilos for 5 reps. So I'll leave that session probably feeling like I could have done more, but that's fine because the next week we're then going to go to 90%. And the week after that, 95%. And then week 4 will be our 100%. So this might be for a competitive deadlifter. This might be their competition lift. It might be competition day on week 4. So week 3, they would have done 95%. And then on week 4, they're ready to go into their maximum deadlift that they could possibly do. Now, the other thing to note is, like I said, it maybe takes like 10 days for someone who's lifting super heavy deadlifts to recover from. So what this means is that if you want to program more deadlifts into your session, into your week, so you want to do 2 deadlift weeks, I would then suggest doing one strength-based deadlift session and then one hypertrophy-based deadlift session. Now, when we do the hypertrophy-based deadlift session, I would then not do a standard deadlift. I would do a variation, either that snatch grip, the deficit, the pause, one of those variations of the deadlift. I would do that for my hypertrophy day, and that would be like 8 to 15. The reason for that is because obviously with those variations, we cannot handle as much load. And so the physical strain on our body is going to be a lot less. Even though we're working like close to failure, the load is less. So we should be able to recover a little bit better from it. So if you're a bit more advanced and you want to do a lot of deadlifting, I would suggest one heavy session per week and then one hypertrophy-based session. Now, on the flip side of that, comes if you want to add in stuff like your squats. If you're only working on your deadlifts, then that's fine. You can have 2 sessions dedicated to your deadlifts in a week, one strength, one hypertrophy. But if you want to obviously improve in other things, let's say you're having a squat session, if in 1 week you're planning on doing a heavy squat and a heavy deadlift, again, if the load is high, so if you're more advanced, if you're trying to do a heavy squat and a heavy deadlift in the same week, chances are one of those sessions, whichever one you did first might be good, but whichever one you did second, you probably haven't fully recovered from that lift. So if I do, let's say, a heavy set of squats on Tuesday, and then I have deadlift planned for Friday, those deadlifts, I'm gonna make hypertrophy focused. So if Tuesday is strength focused squats, Friday is hypertrophy focused deadlifts. And then the next week, I reverse that. So the next week, I will do hypertrophy-focused squats. And then on the Friday, I will do strength-focused deadlifts. So make sure that your body is fully able to recover from these sessions. Otherwise, you are just going to see a plateau. You're not going to be able to reach whatever goals it is that you have. So if you want to do more exercises on your deadlift day, especially on your strength day, I would make sure that they're only accessory exercises. So for example, something like a leg curl, okay? You can choose what that is, but it can't really be any compound lifts, okay? Like you couldn't then go into a heavy set of squats, hip thrusts. Like I would suggest that you do some accessory exercises that isolate certain key muscles that are involved in your deadlift. Could be something like a good morning as well. And that way, you could still get benefit from the session. But if I try to do really heavy deadlifts and then go into some really heavy squats or even just hypertrophy focused squats in the same session, the squats aren't really going to benefit anywhere near as much as what they could have if I hadn't done the deadlifts. So it's probably not worth doing. So there you have it. That hopefully is the only deadlift video you're ever gonna need, okay? So good luck when you start trying those deadlifts out there. Boom, classic sign off.